Immigrants are criminals. Immigrants are rapists. That's what we're hearing right now, but the fact is that immigrants commit way less crimes than native-born citizens. In fact, no matter how researchers slice the data, the numbers show that immigrants commit fewer crimes and reduce crime rates by infusing new capital into rundown areas. Studies have shown that filling abandoned buildings and fixing neighborhoods make residents less likely to commit crimes. Somehow this is not seeped into the public mind, and Donald Trump isn't helping this very much. But what say you? Like, how is it that we start changing the narrative? Because apparently, in the minds of everyone, we're going to have some sort of influx of like criminal immigrants that are going to just overrun our country.
Well, I think the criminals are running the country. I think that's the truth of the matter. How do we change that narrative? How are we going to change the narrative in this country that's against all people of color and the disenfranchised and women? Think about all the elections prior to this. We've heard fact checking more than anything. It trends now. They have have a live fact checker during a debate. Like they
Which,
cough,
by the way, that was
and they're
smart.
like this. I don't know if that's real.
Yeah, but I
smart.
really wonder how many people actually went to see those facts being checked, went to HillaryClinton.com to see that. Because in the moment, you're hearing these things and people are like, yeah, and they're cheering. And it's almost like people don't want to know the truth anymore.
Yeah, I mean, there were the independent fact checkers, and those are the ones that I went to that were not affiliated with either campaign. But I mean, I just think when it comes to stuff like this is the fear that is being fed that continues to cause the hate and the divide between the haves and the have-nots. This is all part of the narrative that continues to feed this thing in America, that people of color are dangerous. They're coming to take what's white people. They're going to do to white people what was done to them before. It's all of that is just to continue to feed the dissent, the hate, and the fear that keeps people down while those corporate people and all those big powerful, rich people get richer, and we're down here fighting the Mexicans and the Muslims. That's all part of the bullshit. And I just think that when you hear the facts that immigrants are not as likely to commit crimes because they're afraid that they're going to get deported, and they're usually here because they're seeking some form of asylum, it's just interesting to hear this kind of stuff because we are, in our communities, we know this is the fact. How many people do you know that are undocumented that are going to go out and commit crimes? Probably
they're trying to keep their head down. They're not trying to draw attention to themselves.
They're not trying to draw attention to themselves. That's absolutely true. And I think the only way that you counter this is that you got to have, more immigrants, more minorities coming out, like examples that say, hey, like, I'm not that. My mother isn't that. My uncle isn't that. My cousin isn't that. We are not that. They're taking one or maybe five particular cases and they're stretching that. And they're, as you stated, they're building off of the fear that Americans have, native-born Americans have. They have this fear, and they need someone to blame. And so, who can they point the finger at? But it's funny because I constantly hear people talk about Latinos, the Hispanics, the Mexicans. They're taking our jobs. They're immigrants. They're taking our jobs. And it's like, what jobs? The jobs that you're lining up to do? No,
Absolutely.
you're not doing that job. And if we really want to have a real discussion about it, who's hiring these people? Businesses. Businesses are hiring these individuals. My mom came to this country as an undocumented immigrant, and her first job was cleaning a skyrise building in Houston, Texas. And everyone else that was in that building was undocumented, being paid under the table by a big business. Yeah. So we can't sit here and say, well, they're taking our jobs, because first of all, a lot of Americans feel entitled. We're a society now that we feel entitled. We feel we have a pride component to us, and we're not going to, that's a lower standard, and then at the same time, we're going to sit here and say they're taking our jobs, but they're coming here because people are going to give them jobs.
There's a need.
There's a
demand.
But there's people giving them the jobs.
Yes, absolutely.
And so if we want them to stop coming, then we have to start holding these businesses accountable. We have to start finding these businesses. We have to start attacking these businesses. I know a lot of people that are against, immigrants and immigrants and immigrants, but they have acres of land, and guess who works on that land? Immigrants. Specifically, Mexicans, undocumented.
Of course.
So it's like you can't have it both ways.
I grew up in Santa Monica, and there's this street right by the Home Depot. And every morning when I would drive to school, my grandma, we drive and lining the streets, and all the pickups would just pull up right there. There was no question where they were. There's no question where to find these folks. But people needed the labor. But it was funny because this is an issue that you just don't see politicians in Congress really take up in a very serious fashion. No one wants to talk about it because these two sides, they're not even arguing about how is the best way to enact comprehensive immigration reform. They're arguing over, are these people valuable or not?
Yeah.
And that's the messed up part.
Well, that's why we need to vote, and that's what those of us who have the power to vote, because it does make a difference on the local, on the regional, and on the state level. Like the Dreamers in California, they're not going to get deported because people voted that into effect, and that's what we need to do. You know, that's not the case in other states, and we have to be active in voting because we do not believe that voting is effective and it works, but it actually does, especially when it comes to these kinds of issues. We have to hold these local politicians accountable, our state politicians. These are the laws that affect our immigrants. These are, thankfully, our young people that are in college, that are receiving a post-secondary education here get to stay. But that's not the case in other states throughout the country. That's not the case in most states. I think it's important for us to be informed and to be active in our government and our local government, not just with the clown Trump and Hillary, but on a local level.
And to turn the light this way on media, because honestly, all of these narratives and all these stories that are being spun by folks, they believe it because they're not seeing the reality of this community. It's easy to make someone into a caricature. It's easy to vilify someone. But if you look here, you have someone who's Puerto Rican and Dominican, someone from El Salvador, someone whose family's from Mexico. And us doing this, us having this conversation right here is doing that. And so we need more and more of that so that people can say, actually, you're not the exception. You're the rule.